we need to pump all the content around this. Like,
Yeah, I need more of it again because again, I'm sloppy. Historically, throughout my life, I've been pretty bad with money. Bitcoin probably saved me, like in the sense of like making me think about this stuff and probably providing me with the facilities to actually get married and have a family. Like God knows where I would be if I didn't find Bitcoin.
all right. What is up, freaks? Welcome back to Bitcoin is Hard. This is a Choice App production about Bitcoin and personal finance. Today, we are hugely flipping the script, and we have Marty Bent on the guest side of the microphone, the beautiful microphone at the Bitcoin Commons. So welcome, Marty.
Brian, thank you for having me. I think it is always interesting to be on this side of the mic, this side of the interview, if you will. I hope I can bring you a good guest experience.
I think you will. I think you're going to. And I'm gonna start it out of. I'm gonna take us way back. Okay, I'm gonna take us way back. As a Tales from the Crypt listener, I've heard this story about a young Marty riding back from college with his dad and explaining Bitcoin in the car for the first time. I want you to take you back to that moment, and I want you to take us even backwards farther from that moment. Who was the Marty that your dad was listening to? Was that like a good personal finance Marty? Was that a good with money Marty? Or like what was your relationship with money growing up and your thoughts around money growing up?
Yeah, so we're gonna have to go back to when I was 13 and I started my second summer job. First summer job was selling papers on the beach, and that was just a good experience and learning about work ethic and actually getting out and working and earning your own keep. I didn't make a lot of money selling papers, but I was 12 and I learned a good lesson in work ethic in the sense that I was walking miles along the beach and I wasn't able to go home until all my papers were out of my bag. Next summer, I came down the shore and I needed a summer job and I got a job at the hot dog stand at our beach. And that was really my first job where I started making good money. Selling hot dogs at the beach is a very lucrative business. People are down on vacation, they're renting houses for a week, 2 weeks, maybe a month at a time. And while they're on vacation, they don't feel like making lunches. So they will use the convenience of buying hot dogs by the beach. And if you throw out a tip jar, it says tips for college on it, people love throwing money into that tip jar. And so at a very early age, I started a summer job at this hot dog stand. And so my first interaction of actually getting paid was interesting. I think this is, and I actually think, Bubba, I love you. I love my boss, but I think maybe at a young age, I got acquainted with money and the concept of saving, perhaps in the wrong way, because I got paid out in cash every single day. So I'd work like 11 to 4:30 or 5, and then before I hop on my bike to go back to my house or go surfing, I'd get handed a wad of cash. And at that age, it was pretty massive to be getting handed cash every day. And you go to the courts to play basketball on the playground, play with your friends, and you're going to the convenience store like, oh yeah, I can buy all this gum, I can buy all this candy. And so at an early age, I was introduced to cash via jobs uh, in a very direct way. Where I got paid out in cash every day. Fast forward, I held that job for 8 summers, so until I was 22, and every summer I worked at the hot dog stand. And when I got into high school and beyond, and even I worked there for a few summers in college as well. I would try to save, but then I would save up as much as I could, and especially in college, I went to school in Chicago. In Chicago, DePaul University was a bar school, and so like it's not like you're going to frat houses or apartment parties. You were going out and spending money at bars, which got pretty expensive. And so my freshman year of college, I had saved up $10,000 over that summer, I believe, and that was all gone within 8 weeks of my first freshman year of my freshman year of college. So I then had to go get a job at a Japanese restaurant to sustain myself in college. So a long-winded answer to your question. My personal finances at that point, when I was Marty, sitting in the passenger seat of my dad's car, explaining the mind virus that Bitcoin had injected into my brain as we were driving down Westchester Pike. At that point in time, Marty was terrible with personal finance. He was getting money and spending it as quickly as he could.
Mm-hmm. And I think so. what I want to do then is now compare that with like, or do you, I guess I'll ask, was that impacting the conversation? Like, because Bitcoin is already very hard to explain, but then, and especially when you're trying to do it for the first time, did your dad know that about you? Like, that he didn't feel like you were great at managing the money also? Was that impacting the conversation, or was it just completely different things at that point?
At that point, the topic of conversation as it pertained to Bitcoin was around monetary policy and currency markets specifically, because I worked at a managed futures fund at this point, and moved on from the hot dog stand into a big boy job at a fund. And so I was thinking about it purely in the concept of like a competitor to the dollar in the sense of international trade. It even had clicked with me at like the store value aspect and
Mm-hmm.
the savings. It probably wasn't until honestly I read the Bitcoin Standard that like lowering time preference as a concept really got ingrained into my worldview, and that was years into my Bitcoin journey. Up to that point, it was really like, okay, like how is this going to compete with other currencies on the international stage and affect international trade and the balancing of international trade deals.
Mm-hmm. And so, and I think there's so much content out there on the giant macro stuff of how Bitcoin is impacting people. And I think what I've been realizing over just being involved in Bitcoin Twitter for a while and even doing, we're up to, I think, like 13 episodes of this podcast and just really trying to, I realize how hard it is to actually really keep a conversation on the track of like Bitcoin and personal finances at a micro level, like for a family, because we're so used to kind of thinking about it in this broad terms. But I have this like thing and this itch to like continue talking about it because look, I found Bitcoin when I was 23. Like I first made a Coinbase account when I was 23. Like I'm 30 now. Like I'm 30 now. Like I'm married. Like I have an 8-month-old son. Like I have a house. Like, and that whole time, dude, we've been stacking sats. Like the freaks have crushed it. The freaks have crushed it. Like, and you crushed it. And like for everyone listening, like if you go back and listen to episode 160, Marty was nice enough to have me on Tales from the Crypt, and I was the beginning of that summer during the like lockdowns when the lockdowns were very fresh. It was dawning on me that like Bitcoin is happening right now. It's happening right now. It's happening in the future, yes, but it's happening right now. And I was realizing that like I had been pouring my savings and savings into this freedom money. In 2020, like we needed some freedom. Like we needed a heavy dose of like some freedom in the present. And that really, and then like 17 episodes later, or like 13 episodes later, like Marty had on Mike Peterson from Bitcoin Beach before any of this, like now what we know today about El Salvador came down. And it was also like very soon around the time that like Strike app came out and made it possible to spend dollars and have a business receive Bitcoin. And I say all that to say, I think what's interesting is that like we have been all, and I mean Bitcoin Twitter collectively and just kind of the freaks from your show and just things like that, like we've grown up together, like in a certain sense. And like we've grown up with Bitcoin. Like all of my W2 jobs, like in my life, have all been after like relatively like having a dialed in thesis about Bitcoin. So it's like we're we're crew one, like first one of like needing to carve out the new personal finance advice because none of the other stuff works anymore. Like that world is dead. And so how like do you agree with that, or do you feel that framing, or like what when I just say the words like Bitcoin and personal finance together, or just think about families and think about managing money, like where does your brain go?
I mean, it's totally been. I totally agree with what you just said. We're the same exact path. Like I was 22, 23 when I got in. I'm now 30. I have a child. I have my second on the way coming this summer. Moved to Austin. We don't own our house. We decided to rent just to get a lay of the land of Austin before we decided to pull the trigger on anything from an ownership perspective. But yeah, I mean, again, going back to young Marty when he was working at the hot dog stand, even right out of college, working at the fund, like getting a paycheck, spending it. I remember at the fund, I got my first bonus check, and that was the first time I bought a lot of Bitcoin. And I bought it like at the fucking top when it hit like 1,400, and then went all the way down to like 180 over the course of the next 2 years. And it was hard to hold onto that, but I don't know. There's something about Bitcoin, understanding its scarce nature, that really forced me to try to hold as much as possible and continue stacking as much as possible. So, but back then, 22, 23, Coinbase account as well. Tried to buy, I think it was like $50 a paycheck or something like that, just a little small amount. And then buy bigger amounts when I had a windfall of cash, like a bonus check. And then to this day, I've increased my DCA to weekly. I buy a chunk every Sunday morning, and then between Sundays, if I have again extra cash laying around and um, want to buy more, I impulsively buy between those Sundays. But I always have those recurring buys weekly, week in, week out, without fail for years now. And then for me, from a business, so like I've become a business owner, which is like the weirdest thing to think of with this media company and a bunch of other ventures I have going. I run businesses now, and it really didn't hit me until like probably within the last year and a half, that I'm actually like running businesses and need to think about like bookkeeping, expenses, revenues, and doing the accounting for all that. So actually, like, that's one thing I'm doing right now is getting the business in order, getting a bookkeeper set up, trying to get better accounting practices. I've been doing that by myself up to this point, but it's gotten to a point where it's a good problem to have. We're having a lot of success, and I need to begin allocating these functions to a professional. I can't do it myself anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really busy with the
And
company.
that's happening in dual currencies also, right? Like,
That's the point I'm trying to get to, is like, in a lot of our revenue is Sats now, and so
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
and running the business too. I would actually say like more than 50% of our revenue at TFTC on the podcasting side, advertising side, will be in Sats this year, which
yeah,
is, and I, as a Bitcoiner, want to hold as many, but
mm-hmm,
I also have to run a business. I have to pay people. We got a car here.
mm-hmm,
Split the ad revenue with Matt on
mm-hmm,
stuff that
mm-hmm,
we're doing together. And so, like, yeah, like I want to hold as much as possible. And then it's like, yeah, so I'm right now trying to develop strategies and policies for turning sats into dollars when I need them, or being able to purchase goods or services with sats that we have on the balance sheet. And then beyond what we have going here on the media company, like, I want to create as many sat streams as possible. So I have a mining operation, a personal mining operation I have going on, just so that's a daily, multiple times a day auto stack in the background. Just getting I follow the slush pool Telegram group, and it's just like awesome getting pinged like when they find a
mm-hmm.
block. And you're like, yep, I just made some
Yep.
sats. I just made some sats.
No, I love that you just use the word sats stream. Like, I've been saying that too, like sats flow. Like, and in this whole thing of like Bitcoiners have been stacking for a long time. It's time to, in my opinion, start to pivot to sats flow. Like, we need to be we need to be thinking about our sats flow, and not just on like the appreciation in purchasing, like not just protecting purchasing power. Like, we need to continue to take ground and continue to like leave fiat money, like, honestly. And that like the tools are there in being created, because everything you just described at a business level, like, families are also having to wonder that as well. Like, and if Cash App and Strike App are going to continue to pay athletes to put the word paycheck and Bitcoin in the same sentence and tweet it out to the entire world, that's then going to cause people to immediately go to, okay, how do I pay my bills with Bitcoin? Like, that's like when normies are asking, hey, how do I buy something with Bitcoin? This is where I've reframed my brain on this. Like, when normies are asking, hey, how do I buy something with Bitcoin? That's not a bad question. That's a terrific question. That's like a thank you for asking question. Here's how. Like, in giving people like the transitionary tools. Like, dude, like Cash App is, you can bank on Bitcoin. Strike App, you can bank on Bitcoin. Like, there's multiple like solutions now like for this, and they're getting better and better every day. And exactly, yeah, just everything you said. I was, for a family perspective, budgeting is already hard. Budgeting while married is hard. Budgeting while married in two currencies is harder. And so I'm just like, there needs to be we need to pump all the content around this. Like
Yeah.
we just need more of it.
Yeah, and I need more of it again because again I'm sloppy. I've historically throughout my life have been pretty bad with money. Bitcoin probably saved me, like in
Mhm.
the sense of like making me think about this stuff and probably provided me with the facilities to actually get married and have a family. Like God knows where I would be if I didn't find Bitcoin. Like I probably wouldn't have had the confidence to have a child or to even get married. Actually, when I got married, I was unemployed uh, my wife, God bless her, like was willing to marry me. Probably the lowest point in my life. I was unemployed at that point for like a year, and unemployment extended for many months after our marriage. But I had Bitcoin, like
Mhm.
sitting there. Unfortunately, I had to sell some because to live at that point, and I did it very seldomly and only when I really had to. But I did have that safety net that provided me that, and now as my family grows, as the business grows, again, just trying to create as many SATs flows as possible. So advertisements, we got podcasting 2.0, we've got the mining. I don't know if you saw it, but we're working on integrating a BTC Pay server and open node integration with Ghost so that we're going to begin syndicating our newsletter, Marty's Bent, specifically from there. When from Ghost instead of using MailChimp. So we'll cut that MailChimp expense. We'll keep it on
Amazing.
ghost.org. We'll syndicate it out, and then I want to be able to do like a paid member subscription tier where somebody can pay me $5 a month, $10 a month. We don't know what the number is, and I think we may paywall one bent a
Mhm.
week or something like that. We're still figuring out what
Mhm.
we're going to do. Just
Can
to go ahead.
Can I take it back just a second? Just a second.
Sure.
All that is genius. I want to take something back a second. When you said you had to sell to live, I want to completely reframe that also. I want to completely, my brain has reframed this and I want to get your opinion on this. Marty, you didn't sell. You bought dollars. Like you were already on the Bitcoin standard. Like you were already like living on Bitcoin. Like, and I'm just kind of this whole, I, okay. I'm frustrated a little bit. You know how you were just recording with Max and you were getting like ramped up on the topic. Here's a topic I'm frustrated and ramped up about. Okay, the OG Bitcoiners that me and you were following when we found Bitcoin did not do a great job of framing living on Bitcoin correctly. Okay. And I'm going to like say this. I want to get your reaction to it. You don't have to agree with me, but the whole like never sell, like hodl forever thing, like, no, there's people that are on the Bitcoin standard, have already chosen to like be unbanked or whatever, and they would buy dollars when they needed to. I had that completely framed wrong, and I thought we were causing like number to go down, and I thought that was like bad personal finance, and I thought that was only for like cypherpunks and nomads. Okay, but that's not true. That's not true. Like you already are. This is legitimately mathematically better money, philosophically, morally, everything that we know, everything that you and everyone else and all the freedom fighters have done a great job of pumping onto the internet is all exactly true. And now we're taking action in our own lives to use Bitcoin as a standard in our lives. And if we have to deal with a counterparty that runs on a separate currency, so be it. If there's friction costs involved in that transaction, in that exchange rate, so be it. Like, that's I think what has like shifted so much in my brain now, and why I'm so excited about like why I just like I'm reinvigorated about the next 10 years and about us all growing up and having families and taking ground and building citadels, because we don't have to wait for anything. Like we can do it right now.
I mean, I completely agree, and that's the thing. Like, it sucks selling Bitcoin though. Like, my wife and I talk like that's if we ever have to sell Bitcoin, which we haven't uh, in a while, but like when we used to have to, it was like, damn, like I really don't want to sell this, or I don't want to purchase dollars. I don't want to lose sats. So like, and that's why, like that feeling, particularly that conversation that leads to that feeling, like, all right, like we need cash. I need to buy some dollars. We got to give up some Bitcoin. It always hurts me personally. I'm sure
Mm-hmm,
many
mm-hmm,
many others feel this as well, and so that's why, again, I've tried to create as many SAT streams as possible that, I'm passively stacking via podcasting 2.0, the mining, advertising on the podcast, and plus my DCA, but it lowers the, or it what's the word I'm looking for? It it lessens the blow when you have to purchase
Hmm.
dollars.
Hmm.
When you have to, because like, all right, I'm giving up these sats now, but I've got streams in the background that are bringing to me at the same time.
Yes, because your Bitcoin budget, like of the like how much sats stays then flat or can stay flatter because you
Yes,
have inbound sats. Totally.
yes.
How do you talk to us more about the way that you and her like you make decisions together and talk about do you use budgeting software or like then on the personal or you're looking for budgeting software on the personal front then too? How do you
Yes. So I actually just got a bullet journal, and I've made it. I want my 30s to be much different than my 20s in terms of personal financing, budgeting, and tracking everything. I'm notoriously terrible at tracking my spending when I have recurring payments on how much is coming in. Like sometimes I look at my bank account, like, where the hell did this come from? And it's not a good feeling. I just feel discombobulated and disorganized. And so that is something that my wife and I are making a concerted effort to change as we grow together in this next decade. I got off my pulled myself up from my bootstraps after being unemployed, started the Bent in June of 2017, the podcast in September of 2017, and then it took a few years to get momentum. So we probably didn't get like momentum where it became like a revenue producing, significant revenue producing media company until mid 2020. 2021 started to pick up. It's going to continue to pick up this year. So it's now like, all right, now we have a lot of revenue, and I do not want to be disorganized and discombobulated like I was in my 20s. Like I always, like after being unemployed for a year and a half, and really living on a shoestring budget and struggling. I do not ever want to go back to that. And uh, since the podcast and newsletter started, I've just been sprinting, trying to get it to a place where it's successful and it can be something that I do that allows me to support myself and my family. And I think it's there now. It's like, all right, now that we have that support, the momentum's gotten us to a point where I'm pretty confident that we'll continue to bring in revenue and dollars and sats. Okay, like now let's get organized. Let's get a budget. Let's get better visibility into exactly what's coming in, how we're spending, what we're saving, and how many sats are we accumulating.
Mhm. Mhm. I love that, man. I love that.
Yeah.
I think that's exciting. I'm excited to watch that. Like this and this year same thing. I don't know if I'm sure you've been following like the hashtag, but like dude, I'm 2022, I'm only going to use services that also support Bitcoin. So if I'm using dollars, at least I want to use them at services that have Bitcoin. Like I'm done with services that aren't upgrading because that's not working. Like I called my bank and I said the currency that you support is not working for my family anymore. But are you going to do something about it? Okay, you have no updates on the pipeline to do anything about it. Okay, then this doesn't work for me anymore. Like and so I'm yeah. What
It's, I mean, I love it. Or they're like, what do you mean? What do you mean the currency? We only use dollars here.
I said look up Marty Bent and look up fix the money, fix the world. Just Google it. That's what I told them. And dude, we're talking to real humans. When people, we're talking to real humans on the other end of the phone. The call center at the banks, like we can flip them, and these humans that work there, we can flip them and we can bring them to Bitcoin, and they can work on Bitcoin services. Um, I just have any other thoughts on the like pay me in Bitcoin like momentum or just any other things that's like changing the game theory on just kind of how Bitcoin budgeting and how Bitcoin stacking is like changing for people.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a massive movement. I think and Matt mentioned this on RHR the other week, like the price vol. Like I really hope we normalize this to a point, and I think we're doing a good job, and the momentum's growing where it is going to be normalized in relatively quick order in the next year, 2 years, 3 years, where it just becomes untenable for the tax policy around Bitcoin to be what it is today because there's so many people working for it, like businesses accepting it, and like just the tax regulation around Bitcoin is just not conducive. I mean, you can still live on Bitcoin and do all that, but it's like extremely burdensome not to pay the taxes that come with spending Bitcoin, which is very annoying. And hopefully the pay me in Bitcoin movement continues to develop momentum where it just becomes literally untenable for policymakers to continue down the path of taxing Bitcoin the way it's being taxed. And I know you've tweeted about and it's spoken about on the podcast, like the whole capital gains um, policy that just came out or is being presented
The de
to
minimis exemption.
yeah, that's a
Yeah.
pretty big step in the right direction. I want to see that momentum continue. And yeah, no, I think it's only going to continue from here, especially as more and more people become privy to what the Fed and other central banks around the world are doing to our money. It's still early in the game in that regards. I mean, we as Bitcoiners are very attuned with what's going on in the fiat monetary world and how it's creating an inequality wedge and decreasing in individuals' purchasing power slowly but surely, but now more quickly over time. But still, the general public at large, I think they're more aware of it now than they were certainly 2.5 years ago. But I think there's more awareness to be had in terms of like the common man
Mm-hmm.
really understanding like what's happening to his money in the fiat world. And then once that happens, I think we'll just see more and more momentum come in as well as they begin to stack sats and then slowly but surely demand sats
Mm-hmm.
as payment. And like Strike's making it easy to get paid in Bitcoin. Bitwage has been doing that as well. And there's been NIDIGs going to allow people to get paid in Bitcoin as well. I do hope that people go down the path of learning self custody and taking care of their keys, but there will be this transitionary period where people want their hands held, and these services do that for them. But it's still a net positive at the end of the day as
Mm-hmm.
well.
So, yeah, so I hope they learn that too. And I think a super underreported story is NIDIG partnering with the like 25 or 30 like credit unions and or banks, because in the same one way my brain is shifting on the whole like taxation of Bitcoin also is, so I agree that it'll become so prevalent that the government will have to change something. I also agree that I think this is what has changed for me. After, if you actually run the numbers on how much Bitcoin goes up on average per day and how much your fiat, your US dollars are losing per day compared to goods and services, like that's so big and so obvious that like even with the friction of paying like cap gains taxes, you still end up wealthier by like using Bitcoin as your base money. Like I think that thesis is going to be like proven out right this year. And if that thesis is proven out right, and NIDIG, Cash App, Strike, Level, Coinbase, like down the chain, like allows you to use Bitcoin as your base money, like I think we're knocking on the door. Like we're knocking on the door of kind of what we've all been talking about. And then it's like, but and people can kind of be like, oh, well, that's bad because then that's like banks getting into Bitcoin or whatever. And you can be like, kind of, I guess, but also that doesn't replace anything you're already doing with Bitcoin. That doesn't replace your multi-sig. It doesn't replace anything. All it does is it takes from there being dollars in a bank account to being Bitcoin in a bank account, and then you're still interacting with like all your other ACH like methods. So does that future scare you, excite you, or are you like neutral on that?
I think it excites me. I mean, again, I think individuals should hold their own keys, and it's imperative that a critical mass of people do that. And I think you should be aware that the government, as Bitcoin becomes more prevalent and more powerful, they will leverage these third parties to prevent you from doing certain things with your Bitcoin, like taking self custody. However, like that's the nature of Bitcoin. It's an open source system. If banks are going to adopt it, they're going to adopt it, and that's passive buying demand that's going to happen. And it's a normalization of Bitcoin in the mainstream. And so I think it's a net positive overall. And I think over time, people will come to recognize the importance of self custody and being able to control your funds. I mean, that is, I think, a lot of what drives people to Bitcoin is they realize they don't really control any aspect of the money that the fiat money that they've become accustomed to throughout their whole lives. And Bitcoin allows you to control it. And so like that being one of the main selling points of the network, I think just naturally will drive people to eventually get to self-storage. The UX is getting better. It's getting easier to spend Bitcoin via the Lightning Network. Like again, like we just spun up this paywall on our site that we're really excited about. And like, that's what, like something like that, being able to disrupt like content paywalls, like instead of going to Bloomberg and then being like, all right, buy a 3-month subscription, give me your email address, your name, your number, your debit card information. It's like, boom, Lightning invoice, 10 cents article, like in
Mm-hmm.
less than 5
Mm-hmm.
seconds. And
And we're gonna go from this period of, so couples right now are talking. They're like, "Hey," looking at the bank account. They're like, "Hey, where's our money going?" And they're like, "Oh, it's going to Bitcoin." But then what's gonna happen is it's gonna all be in Bitcoin, and then they're gonna, "Hey, where's our Bitcoin going?" It's going to the Marty Bent's paywall. Like that's a huge, like the Overton window is shifting, and that's why this conversation around budgeting like is so important, because the paywalls are getting better.
yeah, and and again, the ability to create sat streams are getting better too.
Mm-hmm.
Like Jack was saying on the interview with Sailor last week, like he plugs in an S19, points it at Slush Pool, and he's got that passive mining revenue stream, that sat stream that he can then send from Slush Pool to his Blue Wall, and then he can take his Blue Wall and go buy tacos, and that's just he has a sat producing machine that enables him to passively stack and then go use those sats to nourish himself with tacos.
Mm-hmm. I like. I've seen it very, very briefly around, but I'm gonna pivot us to real estate. And the way I'm gonna do it is I'm gonna say that I'm excited. I want to see more crossover conversations between rental property maximalists and like Bitcoin mining maximalists. I'm talking about the cash flow of like both of these things. Because buying the asset and sitting on them and doing it is like, I want to see more crossover, and I want to see more comparisons, and I want to see more conversations. What is your, so you touched on it briefly, renting in Austin. Yeah, what is your strategy and like outlook on real estate from a family perspective?
I mean, I want to own a house. I want to own land at some point. But I look out at the market, and I go back and forth, right? So I look out at the market. I'm like, there's no way real estate can sustain this type of appreciation. Like nobody's gonna be able to buy houses except for BlackRock and large institutions. Like there has to be a correction, a material correction at some point in the next few years. Like maybe I'll wait for that to jump in and finally scoop up some relatively cheap land in a home. But then you think like, I'm living in Austin. Everybody's moving to Texas, which is driving up demand for housing, which is going to drive up the price. Like maybe we live in an area that is sort of inoculated from that countrywide potential real estate correction, just because there's so much economic activity here and so much energy here and so many people moving here. And then thirdly, like if hyperinflation does come and they keep printing more money, you can have a crack up boom. So those US dollar denominated prices for the real estate and land can go up significantly. And then I'm like, all right, well, I'm holding Bitcoin, and hopefully that'll outpace the appreciation of the real estate prices. And so, yeah, I guess for me, when it comes to like purchasing land and a home, it's like, all right, like how many sats am I willing to part with for that? And I think I'm not there yet where I'm willing to pull the trigger, but I won't be surprised if in the next 2-3 years I'm there and pulling the trigger. But yeah, it's, that's the other thing too about personal finance. Like me, I've got more many hats. I've got my literal
Mm-hmm.
cathedra hat on right now.
Mm-hmm.
Sit on the board of that company. I got the media company. Again, I got that personal mining stuff going on. I'm writing, I'm podcasting. I work for 1031. I work for a venture
Mm-hmm.
fund, so I'm
Mm-hmm.
sourcing deals and trying to raise money. And so it's honestly like finding the time to do the personal financing. Think about like these big transactions is hard these days too. Which is probably again moving into my 30s, and why I got a bullet journal to try to organize my thoughts in my life is like I do need to make a concerted effort to bring the personal finance side top of mind, and begin thinking about it with more intent. Which right now it's just like get as many stats and revenue as possible, and then figure out what to do with it on the back end.
Mm-hmm. Dude, Bitcoiners are in high demand. Bitcoiners are in high, like knowledge of Bitcoin, and I'm going off of how you're like you have influence because you are a Bitcoiner. Like, do you think you would have as much influence as you do, like if Bitcoin was not a thing?
I I mean, probably not. I mean, I like to think that I would have the ability to develop this type
Yep.
of influence in it, but like there's nothing, the information asymmetry due to the raw new nature of Bitcoin is so large. I don't think that exists in any other realm
Mhm.
outside of Bitcoin. And so having that information asymmetry, like you said, it is very valuable and does allow you to have a certain amount of influence as people are looking to learn more and absorb more. And then you have years of experience, so you know how to operate within the space and
Mhm.
accumulate sats more efficiently than maybe newcomers coming in. And then, yeah, like so, if Bitcoin didn't exist, again, I don't think that information, this type of information asymmetry would exist.
Yep.
Or at least it doesn't exist outside of Bitcoin now. The asymmetry. Maybe if Bitcoin didn't exist and never got created, maybe something else would have been created with a similar type of information asymmetry. But who knows? That's on another timeline in some parallel universe.
No, for sure. I think I said once that if there's it's impossible for Bitcoin to 10x and 100x without Bitcoiners to 10x and 100x also. I really like Bitcoiners have influence, and I think that's why this personal finance conversation is important. Talking about Sats flow is important. Dude, it's been really cool. Like, yeah, just say it as a fan, like, and as a freak. Like, thank you for what you do. The final question that we like asking people on Bitcoin is hard is what is a Bitcoin product or service that doesn't exist yet that you want and would use?
Product just built the paywall, and that has existed, but we built it for Ghost specifically. I mean, as a miner, like being able to hedge with like hash rate. I mean, this is like very specific to mining, which is like just like a hash rate hedging product that allow you to de-risk your operations or to drive down the cost of capital on debt. It's very high right now. Miner financing is notoriously expensive from a cost of capital perspective, 14 to 16% in a lot of instances. So any product that can come and make it easier and less daunting to spin up that SaaS flow specifically for me is something I'm looking for. So this is very specific, a bit nerdy. And yeah, no, and beyond that, like with the Lightning Network getting implemented into browsers, I'm very excited to see what Impervious brings to market next in April when they announce it at Bitcoin 2022. But yeah, like in like not having a clunky extension as your Bitcoin wallet on a browser, and instead just having a native wallet in the browser where you can connect your node and just like basically set thresholds. Like I'm willing to spend X amount of sats on this site, Y
Mm-hmm.
on this site, and like set allowances, and just have that happen automatically to increase the user experience of spending Bitcoin in the browser is something I'm looking for as well.
It's what we wanted from Brave from the beginning.
Yeah, exactly.
Now it's here.
Somebody
Yeah.
fork Brave, take out the shit coins, and just implement it so you can plug in your Lightning node.
Perfect. All right. The hash rate hedger. Hash rate hedger is Marty's answer.
Hash rate hedging products, yes.
Perfect, man. Well, dude, say your final thoughts and say the links where people can find you.
Final thoughts. I'm very happy that you're doing the show. I'm very happy that you exist. I'm very happy that Bitcoin exists. Like you said, Bitcoin does not happen without Bitcoiners. That is our big thesis at 1031 and why we invest in Bitcoin only infrastructure is like, yes, Bitcoin's incredible. I agree with what you said in the beginning. I respect the hell out of OGs and everything they did, but there was always this sort of sense of like, oh, you just need to hold and everything will happen. But I do think there needs to be concerted action on the back end. That's what we're trying to do at 1031 by investing in the space and infrastructure and trying to make it the user experience and the products that make it possible to create sat streams for yourself easier, more prevalent. If you want to find out what I'm doing, I hang out on Twitter at Marty Bent. The website is tftc.io.
Perfect, dude. All right, everyone. Catch you next time.
Hey all, this is Brian. You can reach me on Twitter at Brain Harrington. Shoot me a DM with any feedback from today's episode. This has been a Choice App production. Bitcoin is becoming centric to personal finance, and we want to help you learn how to better engage with Bitcoin financial services. None of this is financial advice and is for education and entertainment only.